Chosen one, the loneliness you have felt was not abandonment. I repeat, the loneliness you have felt was not abandonment. It was selection, it was strategy, it was God separating you before elevating you. You are not here by accident. This moment was arranged by heaven with precision. What you are hearing right now is not random content, it is a divine appointment, a signal that you are standing at the edge of something supernatural. I see you, I see the seasons you walked through alone, the nights when no one called, the days when it felt like everyone had moved on without you, the confusion of watching connections dissolve without explanation, the pain of feeling invisible even when you were surrounded by people. Chosen one, that isolation was not rejection, it was repositioning, it was not punishment, it was preparation. God deliberately pulled you away from certain people, certain environments, certain distractions, because where He is taking you requires a foundation that can only be built in solitude. What felt like abandonment was actually protection. What felt like loneliness was actually training. What felt like loss was actually divine filtration. God was removing what would have complicated your elevation. He was stripping away dependencies that would have become liabilities. He was teaching you to stand without human props, so that when wealth arrives, you will not collapse without human applause. Stay with me. What you are about to hear will explain every season of isolation you have ever experienced. It will give purpose to the loneliness that never made sense, and it will prepare you to step into the wealth that required this level of solitary preparation. I want to speak directly to what you have experienced, because before you can understand why God isolated you, you must first acknowledge what that isolation felt like. You have walked through seasons where no one was there, not seasons where people were busy, but seasons where the silence was total, where the phone didn't ring, where invitations stopped arriving, where you looked around and realized that somehow everyone had drifted away. You have experienced friendships that dissolved without conflict. One day the connection was strong, the next, it was as if they forgot you existed. No argument, no offense, just a gradual fading that left you wondering what you did wrong. You analyzed conversations looking for the mistake. You questioned yourself repeatedly, but the truth was, you did nothing wrong. Heaven was orchestrating an exit. You have felt invisible in rooms full of people, present but not seen, speaking but not heard, occupying space without occupying attention. That invisibility wounded you. It made you question your value. It made you wonder if there was something fundamentally wrong with you that made people unable to connect. You have experienced the particular loneliness of watching others thrive in community while you sat on the outside, seeing friend groups that did not include you, witnessing celebrations you were not invited to, observing connections that seemed to form effortlessly for everyone except you. That comparison added pain to the isolation. It was not just being alone, it was being alone while others were together. Chosen one, I want to validate this experience before I explain it. The pain was real, the confusion was legitimate, the loneliness was not weakness or oversensitivity. You experienced genuine separation, and it genuinely hurt. But here is what I need you to understand. The pain had purpose. Every person who left was being moved by the same hand that is now elevating you. Every connection that dissolved was making room for what is coming. Every season of isolation was building something inside you that could not be built in the crowd. This pattern is not unique to you. It is the consistent pattern of heaven throughout history. God isolates before He elevates. He separates before He anoints. He pulls away before He positions. Consider Moses. Before he stood before Pharaoh and commanded the release of an entire nation, he spent 40 years in the wilderness. 40 years of isolation, 40 years removed from the palace education, the Egyptian culture, the Hebrew community. He went from prince to shepherd, from prominence to obscurity, from crowds to sheep. That isolation was not punishment for killing the Egyptian. It was preparation for confronting a kingdom. In the wilderness, Moses learned to hear God directly. He learned to lead in silence. He learned to function without audience, without applause, without the validation of position. And when the time came, he was ready because the isolation had built what the palace never could. Consider David. Before he wore a crown, he wore the dirt of fields where no one watched. He tended sheep in solitude. His own family overlooked him. When Samuel came to anoint a king, David was not even invited to the gathering. He was isolated even within his own household. But in that isolation, David developed a relationship with God that became the foundation of his kingdom. He wrote psalms that still speak thousands of years later. He built faith that would sustain him through years of running from Saul. The isolation that felt like neglect was actually divine investment. Consider Elijah. Before the confrontation on Mount Carmel, before fire fell from heaven, Elijah was hidden by a brook called Cherith, alone, fed by ravens, invisible to the world. That isolation preceded one of the greatest demonstrations of divine power in Scripture. Consider Jesus himself. Before every major moment of his ministry, he withdrew. Before choosing the disciples, he spent the night alone in prayer. Before his public ministry began, he spent 40 days in the wilderness. Before the cross, he separated from even his closest friends to pray in Gethsemane. The pattern is unmistakable. Isolation precedes assignment. Solitude precedes significance. Withdrawal precedes power. This is not coincidence. This is divine strategy, and you have been walking through the same pattern that every chosen vessel has walked through before their purpose was released. Subscribe now, so we stay connected. This channel carries words that confirm what heaven is already doing in your life, and comment 777 as your declaration, not performance but acknowledgement, that you have experienced this divine isolation, and you now understand it was preparation, not punishment. Comment your city or nation as well. Let that marker become testimony of where isolation did its work, where solitude built what crowds never could, where loneliness was transformed into readiness. Listen until the very end. What you are about to hear will reframe every lonely season you have ever walked through. Let me explain why isolation is God's preferred method of preparing someone for wealth. This is not arbitrary. There are specific reasons why solitude precedes prosperity. First, wealth attracts crowds. When resources increase, people appear, some genuinely aligned, many not. If you have not learned to function without crowds, you will become dependent on the very people who are drawn to your resources rather than your purpose. Isolation teaches you to stand alone, so that when crowds arrive, you can discern who belongs rather than accepting everyone out of emotional need. I have watched people receive wealth and immediately surround themselves with whoever showed up. They were so starved for connection after seasons of struggle that they opened their lives to anyone who paid attention. And those undiscerning connections became the pathways through which their wealth was drained, their peace was disrupted, and their purpose was distorted. The isolation you experienced was inoculating you against this pattern. You learned to be okay alone. You developed the capacity to function without constant companionship. This capacity will protect you when wealth brings people to your door who should not be let inside. Second, isolation eliminates voices that should not influence you. When you are surrounded by people, you are surrounded by opinions. Some of those opinions are wisdom, many are not, but in the crowd it becomes difficult to distinguish between the two. Every voice sounds important. When you are desperate for connection, God uses isolation to reduce the noise. When people are removed, their voices are removed with them, and in that silence you learn to hear differently. You learn to discern the voice of God from the voice of people. You develop an internal guidance system that does not require external confirmation. This is essential for wealth. When money arrives, opinions multiply. Everyone has advice about what you should do, how you should invest, who you should help, how you should live. If you cannot distinguish God's voice from human voices, you will be pulled in 100 directions by people who have no authority to direct your resources. Third, isolation develops direct dependence on God. When people are present, it is easy to rely on them, their support, their encouragement, their practical help. This is not wrong, but it can become a substitute for relying on God directly. The relationship with heaven becomes mediated through humans rather than direct. God uses isolation to remove the mediators. When no one else is there, you have to turn to Him. When no human support exists, divine support becomes the only option. And in that forced dependence, a connection develops that cannot be replicated any other way. This direct connection becomes your foundation. When wealth arrives, You will need to hear from God about decisions that no human advisor can make for you. You will need guidance that no book or course can provide. The direct line that was established in isolation becomes the channel through which divine wisdom flows for stewardship. Fourth, isolation reveals who you are without audience. Most people have never truly met themselves. They have only met the version of themselves that performs for others, the self that adjusts based on who is watching, the self that moderates based on expectations. When everyone is removed, performance becomes impossible. There is no one to impress, no one to please, no one to adjust for, and in that absence, you discover who you actually are. Your real thoughts, real desires, real patterns, real weaknesses, real strengths. This self-knowledge is critical for wealth. Money amplifies whoever you are. If you do not know yourself, you will be amplified into a stranger. The isolation forced you to confront yourself honestly, and what you learned about yourself in that season will help you navigate the amplification that wealth brings. Fifth, isolation builds a foundation that cannot be shaken by circumstances. When your stability depends on people being present, any departure creates instability. Your foundation shifts every time a relationship changes. You are only as stable as your most recent connection. God uses isolation to rebuild your foundation on something that does not move, on Him, on truth, on purpose that exists independent of who is around to witness it. This rebuilt foundation can sustain any weight because it does not depend on circumstances that can change. When wealth arrives, everything around you will change. People will change how they treat you. Opportunities will change what you can access. Circumstances will change dramatically. But if your foundation was rebuilt in isolation, you will remain stable while everything else shifts. Sixth, isolation teaches you that you do not need to fill every space. Before isolation, empty space may have felt like a problem to solve. An empty chair needed someone to sit in it. An empty evening needed activity to fill it. An empty room needed noise to make it comfortable. Isolation taught you that empty space is not a problem. It is a feature. It creates room for reflection, for hearing, for growth that cannot happen when every moment is filled. You learn to be comfortable with space rather than desperate to fill it. This capacity will protect your wealthy season from being consumed by busyness. Money creates endless opportunities for activity. Every moment could be filled with something. But those who never learn to be comfortable with space fill every moment and burn out. You will know how to create margin, to protect space, to let some things remain empty. Seventh, isolation develops a relationship with time that is healthy. When surrounded by people, time is often dictated by others. Their schedules influence yours. Their demands shape your hours. Their expectations fill your calendar. In isolation, time became yours to steward. You learned to structure your own days, to create your own rhythms, to invest your hours according to your priorities, rather than the priorities of those around you. This relationship with time will be essential for wealth. More resources mean more demands on time, more people wanting meetings, more opportunities requiring attention, more possibilities filling the calendar. But you learned in isolation how to protect your time. That skill will now protect your wealthy season from being consumed by other people's agendas. Let me describe the specific capacities that were built during your seasons of isolation. Because these are not abstract benefits, they are concrete abilities that you now possess because of what you walked through. The first capacity is emotional independence from human approval. Before isolation, your emotional state was likely connected to how others received you. Their approval lifted you. Their rejection crushed you. Their attention energized you. Their indifference drained you. You were emotionally dependent on responses you could not control. Isolation broke that dependency. When no one was there to approve or disapprove, you had to find stability from another source. You learned to derive your sense of worth from something deeper than human opinion. Your emotional foundation shifted from external reaction to internal truth. This independence is invaluable for wealth. Money draws opinions like light draws insects. If you still need approval to feel stable, you will be constantly destabilized by the opinions that wealth attracts. But because isolation built emotional independence, you can hear criticism without collapsing and receive praise without inflating. The second capacity is the ability to hear God without interference. In the noise of constant connection, divine communication gets lost. There is too much input, too many voices, too many distractions. The still small voice gets drowned in the noise of the crowd. Isolation created space for that voice to become clear. With human voices removed, divine voice became audible. You learned to recognize how God speaks to you specifically. You developed sensitivity to guidance that had previously been obscured by noise. This hearing ability will direct every major decision in your wealthy season. Which opportunities to pursue, which relationships to allow, which investments to make, which causes to support. The clarity you developed in isolation will become your guidance system in abundance. The third capacity is resilience, that does not require external support. Before isolation, your ability to endure was likely connected to the support around you. When people were present, you could handle difficulty. When support was removed, endurance became harder. Isolation taught you to endure without props, to push through without cheerleaders, to persist without encouragement, to continue when no one was watching or caring. This resilience is not dependent on circumstances or companions. This capacity will serve you throughout your wealthy season. There will be challenges that money cannot solve. There will be difficulties that crowds cannot comfort. The resilience that was built in isolation will sustain you when resources cannot. The fourth capacity is sharpened, discernment about people. When you have experienced sudden withdrawal of relationships, you become more observant about relational patterns. You notice the signs of genuine connection versus superficial attachment. You sense when someone is present for you versus present for what you represent. This discernment was sharpened through pain. Every person who left without explanation taught you something about the nature of human connection. Every friendship that dissolved revealed something about what true loyalty looks like. The education was painful, but the knowledge is priceless. When wealth attracts new relationships, this discernment will protect you. You will sense who is genuine and who is opportunistic. You will recognize alignment and misalignment more quickly than those who never experienced the isolation you experienced. The fifth capacity is peace that does not require company. Before isolation, peace may have been connected to the presence of others. Company brought comfort. Loneliness brought anxiety. Being with people felt safe. Being alone felt threatening. Isolation transformed your relationship with solitude. What once felt threatening became familiar. What once brought anxiety became comfortable. You discovered that peace could exist without presence, that stillness could be nourishing rather than frightening. This capacity will protect your peace when wealth changes everything around you. You will not need to fill every moment with activity or every space with people. The peace that was found in isolation will remain available in abundance. The sixth capacity is patience, developed through extended waiting. Isolation often involves waiting. Waiting for the season to change, waiting for connections to form, waiting for circumstances to shift. In that waiting, patience was developed that could not have been developed any other way. This patience will serve you throughout your wealthy season. Wealth creates access to immediate solutions. Want something? Buy it now. Need something fixed? Hire someone today. Desire something changed? Resources can accelerate it. But not everything should happen immediately. Some things need time regardless of available resources. Relationships need time to develop. Projects need time to mature. Wisdom needs time to form. The patience developed in isolation will prevent you from trying to accelerate what needs organic timing. The seventh capacity is comfort with your own company. Before isolation, being alone may have felt like failure. Being by yourself meant no one wanted to be with you. Being without company meant you were unwanted, uninteresting, or unworthy. Isolation transformed that perspective. You discovered that being alone could be choice rather than sentence, that your own company could be enjoyable, that solitude could be preferred rather than merely endured. This comfort will protect you in wealth. There will be moments when you need to step away from the noise, when decisions need to be made in quiet, when peace needs to be restored in stillness. If you cannot be comfortable alone, these moments will feel like punishment. But because you learn to enjoy your own company, they will feel like relief. The eighth capacity is the ability to process without immediate output. In connected environments, thoughts often become words immediately. Every reaction gets expressed. Every emotion gets communicated. Processing is public rather than private. Isolation taught you to process internally before expressing externally, to think through reactions before speaking them, to consider responses before delivering them, to let thoughts mature before sharing them. This processing capacity will protect you when wealth brings situations that require wisdom rather than reaction. You will not respond immediately to every provocation. You will not react instantly to every opportunity. The internal processing that became normal in isolation will govern your responses in abundance. Chosen one, count these capacities: emotional independence, divine hearing, self-sustained resilience, sharpened discernment, internal peace, extended patience, comfort with solitude, internal processing. These are not minor skills. These are the exact capacities that wealth requires, and you have them because of what you walked through. Let me speak now about why certain people had to be removed during your isolation season. Because the exits were not random, they were strategic. Some people were assigned to a version of you that no longer exists. They connected with who you were, not who you are becoming. Their presence was appropriate for an earlier chapter, but they could not walk with you into the next one. This is not a judgment on their character. It is simply a recognition that not every relationship is designed for every season. If these people had remained, they would have continuously related to the old you. They would have expected the old patterns, responded to the old behaviors, reinforced the old limitations. Their very presence would have made growth harder because they were anchors to a past you needed to leave behind. God removed them not to hurt you or them, but to free you to become who you are meant to be. The pain of their departure was real, but it was less painful than remaining stuck in a version of yourself that was meant to evolve. Some people would have complicated your elevation. Their presence would have created dynamics that would have become problematic when wealth arrived. Perhaps they would have claimed credit for your success. Perhaps they would have expected access that was not appropriate. Perhaps they would have become jealous in ways that damaged both them and you. God sees what you cannot see. He knows how people will respond to changes you have not yet experienced. The removal of certain relationships was protection from complications that would have manifested only after your circumstances changed. Some people would have drained what you were building. Their needs, their expectations, their patterns would have consumed energy and resources that needed to be invested in your preparation. They were not bad people, but their presence would have created a constant draw on reserves that needed to be protected. The isolation preserved what was being built in you. Without the constant drain of misaligned relationships, you could invest fully in your development. The growth that happened in solitude would have been slower or impossible with certain people still present. Some people were assigned to teach you something specific, and that assignment completed. Their role in your life was instructional, not permanent. They came to teach endurance, to reveal truth, to demonstrate loyalty or disloyalty, to show you something you needed to see. When the lesson was learned, the assignment ended. The completion of their assignment felt like abandonment, but it was actually graduation. You passed the test, their presence represented, and their departure was evidence of completion, not rejection. Chosen one, every person who left during your isolation season was moved by divine coordination. Not one departure was outside of God's awareness. Not one exit was accidental. The same hand that is now positioning you for wealth was the hand that removed what would have hindered your readiness. Let me speak to a specific pain that often accompanies these removals. The pain of being the one left behind. In many cases, it felt like others chose to leave you, rather than you choosing to leave them. You were not the one who created distance. You were the one who experienced distance being created. This dynamic can feel particularly painful because it implies rejection. They chose to go. They chose to distance. They chose to stop engaging. And you were left wondering what made you not worth staying for. But I want to reframe this. In many cases, people did not consciously choose to leave. They were moved by forces they did not understand. The same way Joseph's brothers were moved by what felt like their own jealousy, but was actually divine positioning. The same way Judas was moved by what felt like his own greed, but was actually prophetic fulfillment. People who left you may have believed they were making their own choices, but divine orchestration often works through human decisions. They were moved to create space that needed to be created. Their decision to distance was used by God to accomplish preparation that could not have happened otherwise. This does not excuse anyone who hurt you through their departure. Pain is pain regardless of divine purpose behind it. But it does reframe the departure as something larger than human rejection. You were not simply rejected by people. You were positioned by God through the movement of people. Some relationships also ended because they were built on foundations that would not have survived your transformation. Connections that depended on you remaining stuck. Friendships that functioned only while you were struggling. Dynamics that required your limitation to maintain their structure.
As you began to grow, these relationships naturally destabilized. Not because you did anything wrong, but because the foundation could not accommodate who you were becoming. The ending was inevitable, the moment growth began.
The only question was timing. God often accelerates these inevitable endings to prevent them from complicating the seasons they were not meant to enter. What would have ended painfully later ended painfully earlier. The pain was not avoided, but the complication was. Let me explain how the isolation you experienced will directly protect the wealth that is coming to you. Wealth exposes everyone around you. Money reveals what was hidden. When resources increase, the true nature of every relationship becomes visible. People who seemed supportive reveal expectations. People who seemed humble reveal entitlement. People who seemed loyal reveal conditions. This exposure is destabilizing for those who never learned to function alone. They depend on the relationships that are now revealed as complicated. They need the connections that are now shown to be transactional. The wealth that should bring freedom instead brings confusion and pain, but you have already experienced the exposure. Isolation showed you what people were before wealth could reveal it. You have already learned to function without the connections that others desperately need. When wealth exposes the truth about people around you, you will not be destabilized because you already know how to stand alone. Isolation taught you to function without needing everyone. When wealth arrives, you will be approached by many. Some aligned, many not. Those who never experienced isolation often accept everyone because they cannot bear to be alone. They fill their lives with whoever shows up because empty space feels threatening. But you know that empty space is not threatening. You have lived in it. You have thrived in it. You have found peace in it. This means you can be selective about who enters your wealthy season. You do not need to accept misaligned people simply to avoid being alone. Isolation established your identity without external validation. You know who you are not because people told you, but because you discovered it in silence. This self-knowledge is anchored in something deeper than opinion or circumstance. When wealth brings attention, that attention will include attempts to redefine you. People will tell you who you should be now that you have resources. Media will project images of what wealthy people are supposed to look like. Culture will pressure you towards certain lifestyles and behaviors, but your identity was established in isolation, where none of those voices could reach. You know who you are independent of external definition. That established identity will protect you from becoming someone you never intended to be. Isolation developed boundaries that will protect your provision. When no one was there, you had no need for boundaries. But the process of people leaving taught you about the necessity of limits. You learned through loss what healthy connection looks like and what toxic patterns feel like. These boundaries, developed through painful education, will now protect your wealth. You will recognize when to say no. You will sense when access is being requested that should not be granted. You will hold limits that preserve what God has given, rather than allowing it to be drained by those who have no assignment to steward it. Chosen one, everything the isolation built is exactly what wealth requires. The independence, the discernment, the resilience, the peace, the boundaries, all of it was preparation for what is coming. The solitude was not wasted time, it was strategic investment in your capacity to carry abundance. Let me go deeper on how this protection will actually operate in your life. When wealth arrives, there will be pressure to share it widely. Pressure from people who remember your past and believe they deserve access to your present. Pressure from causes that seem worthy. Pressure from needs that seem urgent. Without the independence built in isolation, you would succumb to this pressure and distribute what was meant to be stewarded. But because you learned to function without approval, you can say no without being destroyed by the disapproval that follows. You can hold boundaries that others think are selfish. You can protect resources that others believe should be shared. The independence gives you the strength to steward rather than scatter. When wealth arrives, there will be voices advising in every direction. Invest here, buy this, support that, partner with them. The voices will be confident. The opinions will be strong, and without the direct connection to God developed in isolation, you would follow the loudest voice rather than the right one. But because you learned to hear God clearly when no human voice was present, you can discern which advice is aligned and which is distraction. You can filter the confident opinions through divine wisdom. You can make decisions based on guidance rather than volume. When wealth arrives, there will be betrayals. People you trusted will disappoint you. Partners will fail to perform. Friends will reveal conditions. And without the resilience built in isolation, each betrayal would wound you deeply enough to distort your decision-making. But because you already survived relationships ending, you can process betrayal without being destroyed by it. You can feel the pain without letting the pain govern your next steps. You can recover without becoming cynical or closed. When wealth arrives, there will be chaos around you, everyone wanting something, everything changing, decisions needing to be made rapidly, and without the peace found in isolation, you would be pulled into the chaos, reactive rather than responsive, stressed rather than steady. But because you learn to find peace in silence, you can create internal quiet, even when external noise is overwhelming. You can retreat into the stillness that became familiar during isolation. You can make decisions from peace rather than pressure. The protection is not theoretical, it is practical and specific. Every capacity built in isolation addresses a specific challenge that wealth will bring. Nothing was wasted, everything was preparation. Let me help you reinterpret the isolation you experienced, because how you understand it will affect how you carry what comes next. The isolation was not rejection, it was redirection. When people left, heaven was moving you towards something better. The relationships that ended were not lost, they were completed, their purpose was fulfilled, and their departure created space for relationships that will serve your next season. Rejection implies something wrong with you. Redirection implies something right with your destination. You were not pushed away from people, you were pulled toward purpose. The motion felt like rejection because you were looking at who was leaving rather than where you were being taken. The isolation was not punishment, it was positioning. Punishment is payment for wrongdoing, but your isolation was not connected to any failure, it was connected to your future. You were being placed in a specific location, a specific posture, a specific readiness that required separation from what was familiar. Positioning often feels uncomfortable because it involves movement from where you are to where you need to be. The discomfort was not evidence of punishment, it was evidence of repositioning. The isolation was not abandonment, it was intimate preparation. Abandonment implies being left without care, but you were never without care. Even in the loneliest moments, divine attention never wavered. The removal of human presence made space for divine presence to become more tangible. What felt like being left alone was actually being brought closer. With human voices removed, the divine voice could become clearer. With human support removed, divine support could become more evident. The intimacy that develops in isolation is unlike anything that can develop in crowds. The isolation was not relational failure, it was divine filtration. Some people interpret isolation as evidence that they cannot maintain relationships. They blame themselves for every departure. They carry shame about their empty social circle. But the filtration was not your failure. It was divine quality control. God was removing what did not belong so that what does belong could be recognized and received. The empty space is not evidence of your inability to connect. It is evidence of divine preparation for connections that actually matter. Chosen one, carry this reframing with you. The isolation was redirection, not rejection. Positioning, not punishment. Intimate preparation, not abandonment. Divine filtration, not personal failure. This understanding will shape how you enter your next season and how you view the relationships that will form within it. Let me add one more dimension to this reframing. The isolation was also education that could not have been received any other way. There are lessons that can only be learned alone, truths that can only be discovered in silence, growth that can only happen in solitude. You received an education during your isolation that no school offers, no mentor teaches, no book contains. You learned how to be alone without being lonely, how to find strength without external support, how to hear truth without human confirmation, how to stand without anyone standing with you. This education is rare. Most people spend their entire lives avoiding the classroom that produces it. They fill every moment with noise, every space with people, every silence with distraction, and they never learn what you learned. The education will serve you for the rest of your life. It will inform how you lead, how you decide, how you relate, how you steward. What you learned in isolation cannot be unlearned. It is now part of who you are. There is also the dimension of preparation for leadership that isolation provides. Those who never spend time alone never develop the internal resources to lead others through difficult seasons. They have not faced themselves. They have not found strength independent of external support. They have not learned to hear beyond human voices, but you have. The isolation prepared you not just for wealth, but for the influence that comes with wealth. You will lead others. You will make decisions that affect others. You will guide resources that impact others. And the foundation for that leadership was built in the season when no one was following because no one was there. Let me speak about what is coming now that the isolation has done its work. Because isolation is a season, not a permanent state. It has an expiration date, and that date is approaching. The isolation is ending, not because you forced it to end, but because it completed its purpose. The capacities have been built, the dependencies have been broken, the direct connection has been established, the self-knowledge has been gained, the preparation is complete or nearly complete. You will begin to notice shifts. People who are genuinely aligned will appear, not the people who left, but new connections designed for your new season. These relationships will feel different. They will not drain you. They will not require performance. They will not carry the complicated dynamics that previous relationships carried. The new relationships are being prepared as carefully as you have been prepared. Just as you went through isolation and development, those who will walk with you into wealth have been through their own preparation. When aligned people meet, they recognize each other. The connection is not forced, it is natural. It flows from shared preparation rather than desperate need. You will also notice that the pain of the isolation is fading. The loneliness that once felt crushing will begin to feel purposeful. The silence that once felt oppressive will begin to feel peaceful. The perspective shift is evidence that the season is completing. But hear this carefully. Do not rush the ending. Some people, sensing that isolation is completing, try to force connections before they are ready. They reach out to old relationships. They accept anyone who appears. They fill the space before it is time to fill it. Trust the timing. The same God who orchestrated the isolation will orchestrate the reconnection. The same hand that removed will bring what is aligned. Your job is not to manage the transition. Your job is to remain faithful and watchful, allowing what is right to arrive in its right time. When you enter your wealthy season, you will not enter alone in the way that isolation was alone. You will enter with a core of aligned relationships that were prepared during the same season you were being prepared. You will have divine connection that is deeper than ever, and you will have the capacity to welcome new relationships without desperately needing them. This is the fruit of isolation. Not permanent loneliness, but prepared connection. Not endless solitude, but strategic community. Not relational inability, but relational wisdom. What was removed to make space, and what will fill that space will be better than what was there before. Let me give you guidance for how to maximize whatever isolation remains. Because even as the season is ending, there is still work to be done in the solitude. First, do not force connections that God removed. The temptation will arise to reach out to people who left, to try to rebuild what dissolved, to prove that you can maintain relationships by reviving old ones. Resist this temptation. What God removed, He removed for reasons you may not fully understand yet. Reaching back to those connections can reintroduce dynamics that would complicate your next season. Trust the removal. What is meant to be reconnected will be reconnected by divine orchestration, not human effort. Second, use the remaining solitude to deepen your relationship with God. The direct access that isolation created is valuable. Before crowds return, before new relationships form, before the demands of wealth fill your time, invest in the divine connection. Pray more, listen more, study more, worship more. The intimacy developed in isolation can be maintained in abundance, but it is easier to establish it now than to recover it later. Use this remaining quiet to build a foundation that will support everything that comes. Third, allow the silence to complete its work. There may be healing still happening, perspectives still shifting, capacities still developing. Do not rush the process by filling the silence with noise. Some people become uncomfortable with extended solitude and introduce distractions to escape it. Television, social media, busy work. These distractions can interrupt the deep work that silence is doing. Protect the quiet. Let it finish what it started. Fourth, prepare practically for what is coming. The isolation is a gift of time and space. Use it to prepare for wealth. Learn about stewardship. Study financial wisdom. Develop skills that will be needed when resources increase. The wealthy version of you will need knowledge that the current version can acquire.
Use the space created by isolation to invest in your readiness. When wealth arrives, you will not have the same time for study that you have now. Fifth, cultivate gratitude for the isolation itself. This may seem difficult, but it is important. The isolation was a gift, even though it was painful. It built what nothing else could build. It prepared what nothing else could prepare. Begin to thank God for the loneliness, for the silence, for the removal of what was not aligned. This gratitude will transform your relationship with the season. What was endured as suffering becomes recognized as investment. What felt like loss becomes understood as gain. Chosen one, honor what remains of the isolation by using it fully. Do not waste the final portion of a season that has been so valuable. What is built in these remaining moments will serve you for the rest of your life. Chosen one, take a breath and let this moment settle into your spirit. What you have just received is not information, it is interpretation. A divine lens through which to view every lonely moment you have ever experienced. The solitude you endured was the tuition of your destiny. Every empty room taught you something. Every silent phone built something. Every dissolved friendship created space for something. And what was built, what was taught, what was created is exactly what you need for where you are going. I speak completion over your isolation season. May what needed to be built be completed. May what needed to be removed be fully gone. May what needed to be established be firmly rooted. The preparation is finishing. The elevation is beginning. I speak discernment over your coming connections. May you recognize who is aligned and who is not. May you sense the difference between those assigned to your purpose and those attracted to your provision. May the wisdom developed in solitude guide your relationships in abundance. I speak peace over the memories of loneliness. May every painful memory be transformed by understanding. May the confusion become clarity. May the wounds become wisdom. May what hurt you become what prepared you. I speak divine connection over your inner life. May the direct relationship with God that was established in isolation continue in community. May the voice that became clear in silence remain audible in noise. May the intimacy never diminish even as activity increases. I speak aligned relationships into your life. May those who are meant to walk with you into wealth find their way to you. May connections form that are free from the complications of the past. May your circle be small but powerful, genuine but selective, supportive but not suffocating. I speak wealth over your prepared hands. May the provision that required this isolation arrive in its fullness. May what you went through prove worth what you receive. May the pain of preparation be forgotten in the joy of manifestation. Chosen one, you are isolated to be elevated. The loneliness was not your story, it was the introduction to your story. The main chapters are about to begin, and you will enter them not empty, not needy, not desperate for connection, but full, complete, and ready. If this word resonated with your spirit, subscribe to stay connected. This channel carries words that confirm what heaven is doing in your life. And comment 777 as your declaration that you understand now why the isolation happened, that you accept it as preparation rather than punishment, that you are ready for what comes next. Comment your city or nation. Mark the location where isolation did its work, where loneliness became preparation, where solitude built capacity for abundance. Go forward, chosen one. The isolation is ending. The elevation is beginning. You were alone to become ready, and ready you have become. I want to leave you with this final thought. The same God who orchestrated the isolation is orchestrating the elevation. The same hand that removed is now adding. The same wisdom that separated is now connecting. Trust was required in the isolation. Trust is still required in the elevation. You will be tempted to forget what isolation taught you once crowds return. You will be tempted to become dependent on people again once people are present again. You will be tempted to lose the capacities built in solitude once solitude ends. Do not forget, carry forward what was built, maintain the connection with God that was established, preserve the independence that was developed, protect the discernment that was sharpened. The isolation ends, but its lessons must remain. You were isolated for wealth. You were separated for significance. You were removed from crowds to prepare for influence. And now that the preparation is complete, the manifestation begins. Your season of wealth has arrived.